How's it going, everybody? Austin Carter here with Attack Line Leather. Today on Toolin' Tuesday, we're going to be tooling up a skull. Hope you all stick around and enjoy. So today we're going to be tooling out a skull. I do a lot of skulls in my artwork. I really like them. They pose different types of challenges. However, after you do a few of them, obviously they get more simple. And there's just a few things to remember when you're doing a skull, and that is to try and make it as 3D looking as possible. There are a lot of curves and a lot of lines, a lot of crevices, and you want to make sure that you get the layering accurate. So here you see that I'm just cutting out the skull. Make sure you have a good sharp swivel knife. Makes your cutting that much more easy. And for today's example, I just found the skull online. It was a free vector. There's a host of skulls you can find that are free. And so I just didn't feel like creating my own. And so I printed one off to tool for y'all today. As always, be sure to tape the back of your project before you start tooling. And for this project, I believe I used two different types of bevelers. This is my largest beveler. And depending on, if I'm working on a project, if this was going into some floral or something like that, I probably wouldn't use this beveler just because it leaves a large bevel. But since this is just on a scrap piece of Herman oak, I went ahead and used it. It kind of defines the edges a little bit better. So a very important stage of tooling a skull is the eye sockets and the nasal cavity. And in a real skull, those are obviously recessed into the head, and so you're going to want to bevel the inside of those eye sockets and the nasal cavity to give it a sunken in effect. And then here, I'm going to be tooling. This is the smallest beveler I own. If you want this beveler, you can get it at Hobby Lobby. But what I'm doing is I'm kind of tooling in where the gums are. You want to think that, or you have to keep in mind that those teeth are set into the skull, and so you're going to want to tool so that those ridges are kind of overlapping the teeth, and then you can go ahead and tool the teeth in there afterwards. And so once again, that's a kind of important 3D effect. And here I'm just adding in some kind of like shading. It just kind of gives that upper jaw some definition. And then what I tend to do, as you see, I have my printout right there. I'll kind of go back and see where there needs to be creases or cracks or anything like that, and I'll just take my beveler. I won't even cut it in, and I'll just bevel where some of those things need to be. And there's all kinds of things you can do to stamp in your eyes. You can just use a regular backgrounder. I chose this one. I don't use it all the time, but for this example, the skull is kind of large, so I just decided to kind of fill it up. And again, most of my work, if I paint the skull, I'll paint the eye sockets in the nasal cavity black, so it looks even more sunken in. And just be careful when you're tooling the nasal cavity. Just kind of tilt your whatever stamp you're using so that you have nice clean edges. And then the last thing I do for the skull is I just start cutting in the details. And what I do a lot of time to kind of get kind of a shadowy effect is do a bunch of cross hatches. After you antique it, it just kind of makes the skull, the parts of the skull blend in better. And it also gives it a pretty kind of worn, grungy, cracked effect that I really like. And so with my swivel knife, I'm just doing kind of basic wispy strokes, and just trying to fill in some of the spaces where there might be some protrusion or some shading areas or something like that. You know, a lot of my skulls I try and make really worn, and a lot of times I'll find that less is more. So I'll just kind of put those cross hatches in strategic places, but I don't want to have the whole thing crazy with cross hatches. And you see me here kind of just, you know, sporadically putting little cracks and teeth, and that's generally how I finish up a skull. I appreciate y'all watching this video. I hope it gives you some sweet ideas for future projects. Y'all take care.